Alright, I thought I'd make a little video on postmodernism. Alright, now, it's an interesting thing. It's not going to be like a scholarly analysis of postmodernism as such, because I don't... Well, I'll just put the chronology, okay? Back late 80s, the word postmodern bugged me. It's like one of these words people brought up to seem smart. And I looked at all the postmodern philosophies and I said, those things have really very little in common. Yeah, there's angst and there's some nihilism and cynicism. And this is being expressed in art by artists that are postmodern artists. But really the philosophies, taken individually are very different. And it's really meaningless and just a way of trying to say something smart without saying anything at all. But then I realized that it's called postmodern for a reason. It's because modernism is the thing that has somewhat of a definition. The modern attitude, compared to the pre-modern attitude, where truth was what the king said, and modern attitude we started to get, well, no, truth is what nature is going to say. And there's a lot of other things that are part of the modern tradition. And so really postmodern just became a chronological definition to me, that anything these philosophies created or around 1900 and later, these are chronologically postmodern. Now, what do they have in common? What are they going to have in the long run? And I started to realize, oh wait, they are going to have things in common. They don't yet because it's so new. It's only a few decades. Give it another 500 years till we really see the character of all of these. Which of these philosophies are going to survive in the longer run, which won't, and what are the themes of these ones that survive? And I realized, well, the advent of this kind of philosophy is coincident with the change from the classical physics into the standard physics. So the classical deterministic physics turned into standard physics, in which there is indeterminacy on the discrete level. The determinacy that we see on the, let's say, the pseudo-continuous level, on the macroscopic level, where things seem continuous rather than discrete, comes from probabilistic behaviors on the discrete level. So a discrete event is indeterminate, has indeterminate aspects to it, but overall, since it's following probabilistic patterns, we can make determinisms based on the patterns. When we have enough discrete events, the pattern gets filled in, and that is quite reliable. That's almost determinate. It's not exactly determinate because each little event is still indeterminate. It's just that those events fill in a pattern, and so if we just talk about the pattern, we can talk as though we're talking about determinations. And I support that. I believe that there's a lot of people in this world that are not caught up with the modern attitude. They have a pre-modern attitude, a superstitious attitude, an attitude where truth comes from authority rather than facts. And those people could just become objective thinkers for all I care. I'm willing to let them get a hold of modernism before they figure out how it fails, because we don't want to have people just skip the modern stage. We don't want superstitious people just skipping the modern stage and going, hey, quantum mechanics lets me still be superstitious. Anything's possible. No, anything's not possible. Things follow probabilistic patterns, and they fit into these little boxes and curves. So there's not a freedom just to do whatever you want. So it's good to go through this modern era where you feel compelled to accept things as they really are, before you realize that there's a lot of weirdness, and that things are not exactly as they seem to be when you make some of these simple material assumptions, which are basically modern assumptions. So my philosophy takes into account this new era, the Gödel's incompleteness theorem, uncertainty, quantum mechanics, relativity, and it also happens postmodern, chronologically, the postmodern part of the timeline. So I still don't spend a lot of time saying that, because I still think that it can be misleading. It wouldn't tell people much. Say, oh, my philosophy is... It wouldn't tell anything about my philosophy, except that I am trying to and have moved beyond the modern assumptions. But strictly speaking, my philosophy would be postmodern. So that's sort of my love-hate relationship with the term postmodern, and why I think, what is useful in the end about that term, and not necessarily useful. I still don't find it too useful, but what's sort of valid. And I think as time goes on, yeah, we will look back at some point and be able to assess the postmodern philosophies and see if there was a theme. And maybe there won't be a theme. Maybe it's going to be an era where everybody has all these different contradictory philosophies, a kind of relativism, and it won't be till the end that we assess that and sort out what the philosophy underlying such a system is. But be that as it may, I'm wondering if you have any ideas on postmodern, if it bugs you. I mean, it used to be really a pet peeve. Like, I hated hearing that term. So I sort of feel like me talking about it, there are people still that hate it the same way I had in the past. And I'm very sympathetic to that, because as I just tried to describe, the reason I've come to think that the word does have some meaning is a bit incidental compared to how it's used, say, in a party conversation by somebody trying to seem real smart, or how it's used in art theory and art criticism, where it's just sort of like a magic wild card that means you can do anything. So it means you can play with contradictions and things like that. But ultimately that does come back to the standard model, where we start to have a picture of a world that does contain contradictions and does contain unpredictability and does contain all these things that make us wonder how secure we can be in any knowledge, even the most solid knowledge. So, cheers.